Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Shannon Rasdin. I'm the Executive Director of the Military Family Advisory Network, and on behalf of our Board of Directors and our Advisory Board, I'm thrilled to welcome you to our event today. We are going to release findings that were a long time and a lot of work in the making, but we had 5,650 military and veteran families respond to this survey, and we're really excited to share our results with you, and then also to really tell you about what we're going to do with our findings. If you don't know much about MFAN, we are a national nonprofit, and we work really hard to understand and respond to the needs of military and veteran families through collaborative partnerships, program development, and through our diverse and broad network. So today we're honored to release our findings and give you a closer look at what the military and veteran families need. I'd like to thank our partners who promoted the survey. There were many nonprofit organizations who helped us get the word out, so thank you to those of you who are in the room and watching online. And especially really thank the 5,650 military and veteran families who took the time to respond to our survey and participate in our research. We want to give a special shout out to our audiences in Colorado Springs, Houston, and Norfolk, and then we have 20 watch parties happening across the country. So we really took the time to get this information out to a really broad and diverse audience outside the Beltway, as well as to our audience, obviously, here in Washington, D.C. Today's event would not have been possible without the generous support of our sponsors at the USAA Educational Foundation, our validators at Penn Schoen-Berlin, our audio and visual partners at PSAV, and to our communications partners at Rheingold. So before I turn the stage over to our Director of Research, I'm honored to introduce our event moderator, my dear friend and a true advocate for military and veteran families, the Honorable Rosemary Williams. Rosemary served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military, Community, and Family Policy from 2013 through 2016, and as Assistant Secretary of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Veterans Affairs from 2016 to 2017. To each position, she brought energy, passion, and a focus on driving positive outcomes for military and veteran families. She continues to fight the good fight for our community and is now using her talents to support the fight against the opioid crisis through her work with the SAFE Project. Rosemary, thank you for being here.
Excuse me. I'll be needing this. A height-appropriate lectern. I so rarely get this. Very exciting. Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. I am going to keep my remarks brief, not just to be respectful of your time and also to get to the great goodness of this survey, but also because Shannon is due today. So we'll just move this right along. Exactly. As Shannon mentioned, I served in the last administration in two of the best jobs in the world, frankly, and it was my honor to serve. During that time, you got a lot of information from a lot of different organizations, and all of it valuable. But when it comes from outside the 202 area code, we know it to be real, about real experiences, the bare truth of what it's like to be a military family. But this survey in particular is so valuable in that it gets into such detail for 5,000 families. And those tiny details are looked at and relooked at to produce a narrative that is going to be of great impact. And MFAN is not going to just stop there with the stop here with the survey. They're going to use that information to drive awareness and help with policy and inform the rich discussion around military families, especially in that transition space, which is so important to everything that we do in the military veteran space. So with that, what I'd like to do is get right at it, if it's okay. We're going to get started with Shelley. This is an honor and a privilege to introduce the brains behind the operation, MFAN Director of Research, Dr. Shelley Kimball, and we'll get right at it. Thank you. Shelley.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. First of all, thank you so much for being here. We are incredibly proud of our results, and we are so happy to be able to present them to you here and to everybody connecting with us today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our research methodology, how we gathered our information, how we coded it and analyzed it. There, Rosemary, there is one part of this, the pulse, participating in the Q&A section. I wanted to make sure that we get a chance to explain that. There's a chance for you to ask questions through Pulse, for those of you who are not here with us today.
Terrific, and thank you for that. Just as a reminder, if you have a question you'd like to submit for the Q&A, please use PSAV, Pulse, information. If we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with your email. And DC audience, when the time comes, you can approach the microphone in the center island. You know, I just have to give this one brag point about Dr. Kimball, and that is she has a PhD from mass communication and media law and teaches media law here at the George Washington University and the University of Florida. Now, Shelley's going to discuss the findings. I've interrupted you enough, and I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
But after she gives the findings, we're going to have a brief panel discussion around the country, which we're very excited about. But again, thank you, PSAV Pulse, for this remarkable platform to help facilitate the discussion today. Sorry, last time I'll interrupt, I promise.
That's okay, feel free. I teach, so I'm used to it. So now I'm going to tell you about our results. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we gathered this information, how we went through it to understand what we had, and then I'll explain to you some of our high-level findings. There's a report online that you can download and read. It's long, but so good. So I know you'll read it, but I'll give you the highlights here. So first of all, our methodology. This is really important to me as a researcher to make sure we get this right. So what we did was, in our participant outreach, we did two things. We did purposive sampling and then chain referral. Purposive is where you find an idea, a topic, something you want to study, and you want to know from the people who live that or understand that, you want to know what's going on with just that demographic. And so we did that here. The demographic was military family life. We needed people who were specifically connected to military family life to tell us what's going on. Then with the chain referral, we sent out our outreach through our advisors, both former and current. But then also we asked those who are taking the survey to pass it along to people like them who are also living this life. And then on top of it, we had incredible support from other groups who work in this space and help military families and veteran families, and to ask them to send out the outreach, because we know that by knowing this information and we share it, we can all use it and benefit from it. So I think that our great success was due to a lot of people helping us in that way. So the question development, which is one of my favorite parts. We asked quite a bit of open-ended questions. So what I was trying to do as a researcher was understand military family support programming from those who are using it and really living in that space. But I didn't want to ask questions that presupposed the answers. So there were some times that we did have quantitative questions, but for the most part, they're open-ended, so that our participants can tell us everything that's happening in their own words. And so I think that's what makes this especially valuable. Unfortunately, the data analysis, when you do that, when you have that many responses, is very long. It's a heavy lift. It's not something you can just put into a computer. We needed brains on that, and so we got a good team of brains working on it and figuring out the analysis. When we analyze this data, we look at it two ways. First of all, descriptive coding. We break it apart into all these little fractured pieces down to the tiniest grains, so we can figure out every minute what's going on. Then we pull it all back together in axial coding. That's when you look at the full picture and see a more holistic view. On top of that, every single answer to every single question got at least 2 brains on it. And so we had more than 153,000 unique responses to questions. And we looked at them multiple times to figure out what was in there so that we can help our families and do better. So within that also, with the question development and the data analysis, not every single respondent would answer every single question. We use conditional branching, and that's a way to say, what is going on with you? I'm going to ask you questions about it. So if we had an identifier, for example, that someone doesn't have children, they wouldn't get a line of questioning about children. If someone identified as LGBT, then they would get a line of questioning about that. So it was sort of like a choose your own adventure, but getting questions and answers that matched our demographic very tightly. So when you see the answers in the report, you'll see manifest effect sizes. That is a way for us to break down those responses and show you the commonality, but know also that every answer to that question comes from someone who's living that experience, nothing extra. So let's talk a little bit about what we did find. So due to that great outreach you see here and these gorgeous graphics that we're so proud of, we did get coverage from all 50 states. As a researcher, I was so thrilled to find that. We covered all 50 states, 7 other countries, and 2 territories. When we looked at who is connecting here, how people are connected to military family life in our respondents, for the most part, they were active duty members and their spouses, veterans and their spouses. But we also did receive and welcome responses from Reserve and National Guard service members, parents of service members, divorced spouses, and survivors, those who had lost a partner, a spouse, a child to service. And when we look at our rankings here, you'll see that for the most part, our ranks congregated in the enlisted ranks. When you look at the actively serving force, this is true also. So it's a nice overlay, as is the branch affiliation. We got close to the general proportions of the actively serving force in our branch affiliations. So, about the findings. Excuse me. They're generally positive overall, and I need to give you that as some context. I'm going to drill down into some issues that we'll be talking about sacrifices and obstacles, but I don't want you to forget that this is a generally positive result. There are good things in here too. Our findings are interrelated. One of the great things about this kind of research is that we can capture topics and responses even in what we might think are unrelated questions. So for example, if I ask a question about employment, our spouses talked about childcare and finances. And so we can pull all of that together to make it much more holistic. Some of the common threads throughout when you read the report: the importance of community. This was new to us. We fielded a survey 3 years ago. This didn't come up then. And so we were really surprised to see the community support and involvement that bubbled up everywhere. Not only just communities, but faith-based programs, those kinds of things. That kind of outreach is working, and our families really appreciate it. The necessity for healthcare, this one didn't surprise us. It came up last time when we fielded our survey 3 years ago. So when it came up again, it told me this is so important to our families, healthcare. And then financial strain, that was everywhere. If there was one thread that I was pulling all over through the results, financial strain. It's in so many pockets throughout. So I'll be showing you some of those, but there's so much more in the full report. So let's start with healthcare. So an interesting thing with the way we ask our early questions in the survey: what kind of support is working for you is the first question you'd get. And then the second question, okay, well then what do you need more help with? What more could you use? Healthcare came up in both. It's the thing they appreciate the most. It's also the thing that they think could use some help. And so if there were a wish list from our respondents, it would be here. More coverage, more medical coverage, especially for our special needs families. More mental health care. And then more accessible care. And that means like locations, appointments, just being able to get in those logistics. And I think that as military family members, this probably sounds about right. Mental health care obstacles, we took a really close look to this to see what might stop someone from getting that mental health care that they're asking for. Our full population said personal feelings and resistance. That's like stigma. That's that internal and external judgment, that feeling that might make you not go in and get help. But then I wondered, might there be a difference if we pull apart those populations? And there was. There was a slight difference. We found that our active duty service members and their families said that insurance and financial issues are the things that might stop them. If they can't pay for the care, they're less likely to go get it. And then with our veterans, retirees, and families, it was logistics. It was like driving to the office, being close enough to get care, or being able to get an appointment without having to wait too long. All of that tells us that stigma is still an issue, but these other issues are surmountable. So then on our next block of results here, finances. We know our families are having a hard time getting ahead. One of our findings here on the left side is 60% of military families don't have enough in savings to cover 3 months of living expenses if there were an emergency. And so we did talk to them and kind of go down that path of emergencies and what are you going to do? We found that most everybody, 92.5% of our respondents, are carrying debt. And so we wanted to know, where is it? How did you get it? And the heaviest debt burdens, they told us, came from these things: homes, credit cards, vehicles, education, and medical costs. Now, another finding you'll see on the left hand of this slide is that we saw that 15% of our respondents have experienced some sort of food insecurity. So we wanted to look at that a little bit more closely, and we will be talking about that in a little more detail today with one of our panels. When our families are facing food insecurity, when they need help, they're going to those community food pantries. That's where they're getting that help. They're also making do with what they have. That means not eating. That means buying the cheapest food possible that may not be healthy, just so they can fill up. They're also asking their families and friends for help. This quote that you see here was so indicative of the responses we were getting in this zone. I don't eat. It's as simple as that. If my kids need food and there's no money till payday, I don't eat. It's not a hard equation to work out. We saw this time and again in those respondents who are experiencing food insecurity. Now, along that financial path, if our families are looking for financial advice, where are they going and who are they trusting? We wanted to understand that so that we can meet them where they are and bring them the information that will help them. We had I find this to be a really simple, elegant block here that came out of the research. They're looking for, first, a source with a solid reputation. Then they want someone who's knowledgeable and helpful. Then they're looking for a source with whom they have a long-standing relationship. And finally, they want a source that is somehow connected to or understanding of the military community. So moving. To me, this is the perfect segue from our financial section because we found that financial strain is one of the greatest burdens of a move. More than employment, more than finding schools for your kids, it was financial. That was pretty surprising. And when we asked them the strain, rate that strain, how much stress are you under financially? It was the top. It was the most they could tell us. They are experiencing a heavy financial burden. And I think any of us who have moved under military orders, we know this to be true. It is that complete household reset. It is maybe the last security deposit. Maybe it is the hotels and the meals along the way. Maybe it's the registrations for your kids, or maybe it's even like buying all the new gear if you're in a new climate. That stuff adds up every 3 years. And so they're feeling the weight. The most common request for moving support was financial assistance for just that kind of thing, that extra stuff that you're paying for when you're responding to military orders. We also found that 43% of our families at some point have said, nope, not moving, not going to go, and they've split their families and they've lived separately. We find that happens often, what they told us, most commonly because of wanting to maintain continuity of the spouse's career or the continuity of kids' education. So that leads me to careers, to employment. So our spouses told us that they are experiencing negative employment search experiences. When they're trying to find those jobs, it is hard. They told us that they have inconsistent and unstable employment. And what that means is that they may be at the top of the rung in one job and they got to start at the bottom. We don't know where we're going to land in this hierarchy. They told us also that their careers are second to the military. If the military calls, we all answer. But in that mix and in that shuffle, spouses' jobs are getting left. They felt a bias against military spouse job seekers. This was pretty specific. What they were saying was that if you, as a military spouse, are going to go to an interview and they figure out that you're a military spouse, they know that you probably have an expiration date on that job. But if a civilian comes in and answers those same questions without that expiration date, they're more likely to get the job. That's the perception of our respondents. We also know that location's an obstacle. We go where the military needs us, but that location may not need us in our careers. And so we may not find jobs in those locations. We also know that spouses are having difficulty finding childcare, and it's connecting to employment. You can't find childcare to go get the interview. You can't keep the job without childcare, and the circle continues because without the job, you can't pay for childcare, and then you're in financial strain. So that's one of the ways that this kept all connecting up. Now, our families told us that that military family life has a generally negative impact on their lives. So when we put that on a scale here is about 2.47 on a 5-point scale. But what they were telling us was this distance from extended family, the frequent absences of the service members, the difficulties finding employment, making ends meet financially, it's all wearing. However, as always, they gave us a bright silver lining on their experiences. They said that even though we're going through this sacrifice and obstacles, it makes us a stronger unit. Our families are saying they're much more cohesive because they're that team that's in it together always. So within our LGBTQ families, we found, interestingly, that they felt a little bit more supported by their civilian communities than their military communities. Now, I have to caution you, this is a small segment of the population, so I wouldn't generalize it to all LGBTQ family members. However, I would start asking questions. What's going on here with this distinction here? We also asked how our participants, all of them, in all demographics, how they felt about transgender service. We found by a margin of 2-to-1, resoundingly, they're in support of transgender service members. Now, as we take our path out toward the end of military family life, we found that, first of all, our participants said they plan to stay for 20 or more years, and they are meeting or exceeding those goals. And those who have not yet transitioned, most of them said they don't plan to leave for 6 or more years. They also said that the key reason for leaving for retirement is eligibility, which doesn't sound like rocket science. I'm eligible for retirement, and so I'll go. However, when you couple that with the blended retirement system, that eligibility moment changes. And so we broke these populations apart using that conditional branching. And we found some fascinating things. So first of all, those who are eligible for the blended retirement system, there's a population that if they have 12 or fewer years by December 31st, 2017, they get to pick. So they get to choose this new system, which is kind of like a 401k, or they can stick with the legacy system, stay for 20 years like the rest of us are doing. However, when we asked them questions about their perceptions and where they are in this process, most of them said they just don't know what they're going to do. Now, one other caveat with this finding, we asked this question kind of early in the process. So the people who get to pick, they have to pick between December 31st of 2017 to a year later, the end of this year. So they have this full window. We asked these questions right before the window opened, 6 weeks or so before that window opened. They still have time to figure it out. So at the moment we asked, they said they don't know what they're going to do, but 23% said they think they're going to stick with that legacy system, and about 9% said they're going to go with that blended retirement system. Those participants who were eligible for blended retirement said they generally don't understand how the program works. It is a change from what's been there before. About 29% said they are feeling positive about it. About 27% said, not sure, still researching. And about 21% said they don't think it sounds like the thing for them. And about 10% were ambivalent. Those are the people like, oh, there's good things and bad things. And those I couldn't really split out, so they get their own home there. But with this group, this won't be the end of the conversation with them. We've kept a core group here, and we're going to continue talking to them as they make these decisions along the way so that we can see what they need, what they're finding, what they're choosing. Now, when it comes to transition from service, when we did that conditional branching, we took them apart. Have you left? Are you still active? They moved into 2 piles. Then if you're active and you have 12 years or fewer, they were in the blended retirement pile. When we went over to this transition from service group, the ones who've already left, we asked them about their experiences so that we can better understand what happens on the other side. And the number one issue we found for them is they're having trouble leaving. They're having trouble finding their place in the civilian world. A lot of times they said they felt like a bus left them off at a bus stop and just kept going. And they didn't really know who they were or where they belonged. And so this quote was one of my absolute favorites in all 150,000 response quotes. I do miss the camaraderie. I do miss the sense of mission and contributing something bigger than yourself. And I miss the sense of community. We weren't this, that, or another thing. We were Marines. We were Americans preserving and protecting our country and all for which it stands. I haven't found that kind of selflessness in the civilian world. So there's an adjustment issue going on here. Now, community. I wanted to bring us back here to this idea before I wrap. And because this kept coming up everywhere, in all parts, childcare community, financial community, food insecurity community. The majority of respondents said that they have positive interactions with the civilian community. They are stepping up. The support services, nonprofit agencies, and faith-based programs are filling the gaps. They're stepping in when we need them. And one of the really fascinating questions we asked that for me was a ton of fun to work with, we asked our military family population, would you recommend military life to someone you care about? Now keep in mind they answered this question at the very end. So they've gone through all of this. They've explored all of these issues, all the sacrifices and obstacles, and we ended up here. And when we asked them that question, 77% said yes, that they would recommend this life. And we wanted to understand that better, so we did two more things. First of all, we partnered with another research agency and asked them to ask civilians the same exact question, so we could figure out how that weighs, how that measures. Within our civilian population only, we found that only 37% said that they would recommend military life to someone they care about. And when we asked our population, why do you feel this way? After all of this, why? And they said that military life gives you opportunities and benefits that are incredible. But even more so, it gives you the chance to live a life of honor and service to a nation that they truly love. So our recommendations. So after all of this and all of these responses, this is what we came up with. These are our recommendations as a result. We'd like to recognize healthcare as a priority for actively serving families and those who have left service. Prepare for an increase in early retirements with the blended retirement system. It's another gateway of leaving, and if eligibility is the thing that's going to let them go, blended retirement is a new way to take that. Consider that family satisfaction will affect retention rates. And explore the financial strain that military families are experiencing. Also, seek out those families who are struggling. They may be a small part of us, but they're an important part, and we need to know what's happening. And develop partnerships with communities and encourage community involvement, because our participants are saying it's working, and it's really valuable. Now, this isn't the end of the conversation for us. We're going to take this data. I have so much more, believe me, than even what's in that amazing report. And we're going to continue to work with it. We're going to geographically pinpoint some of the areas of need, and we're going to be really looking at these demographics to see if there is a population that needs certain help, or if there's certain dynamics that we need to be looking at. So at this point, it's going to get really exciting. I love this, but you're going to love what comes next. I'm going to join Rosemary. We're going to bring you some panelists who can tell you about what these results mean to their real lives.
Great. Thank you so much, Shelley. I'm now delighted to introduce you to 10 stakeholders and advocates. MFAN knew how important it is to bring findings outside the Beltway, where most of the families live, obviously, and to highlight the great work and experiences of people across the country at this particular event. I will briefly introduce each panelist and ask each panelist a question based on the survey's findings. If you have questions for the panelists, we will do our best to get to them after we have heard from all three panels. Our first panel is hosted at the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia in the Eastern Shore. On our panel, we have MFAN Advisor and Community Outreach Manager at the Food Bank, Taylor Miller. Keisha Dilde, a financial counselor at First Command Financial Services, and Commander Arthur Wiggins Jr., the command chaplain at Naval Station Norfolk. Thank you all for joining us to share your experience and expertise. Our first question is for Taylor Miller. Taylor, it's hard to wrap our heads around military families needing help getting food on the table. How will today's findings help you move forward in your good work, and what else should we know about military families and food insecurity?
Hi, Rosemary. In my role at the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia and the Eastern Shore, I am part of a dedicated team that is working daily to lead the effort to eliminate hunger in our community. We have over 350 partner organizations here throughout our service area that are serving as food pantries, soup kitchens, and child feeding programs. Depending on where you're watching this broadcast from, it could be falling right around your lunch hour. For those of us here in Norfolk, it's after 1 p.m. Whether it was due to a busy morning or more than likely nerves, I skipped lunch in preparation for this event. Now, I am hungry. But fortunately, I know that as soon as this is over, I can grab my lunch, which is leftovers from last night's dinner that are currently sitting in the break room fridge. Unfortunately, for 1 in 7 Americans, their hunger is both chronic and persistent, and there aren't any leftovers, or food for that matter, waiting for them. They are food insecure. I'm passionate about this issue and also highly invested in our military families. So hearing the data extracted from this survey regarding both military and veteran families who are struggling to put food on the table for their families is very, very difficult for me. This is an issue that while we know it exists, it's rarely talked about. Unfortunately, it's a bit taboo, if you will. To the families who bravely shared your stories throughout this survey, I can't thank you enough. This data will aid in our advocacy to end the issue of food insecurity across all communities. Military families who struggle with food insecurity are much like their civilian counterparts, and that the issue likely has an underlying cause of something such as a financial emergency, health issue, or that a household is simply not making enough to make their ends meet. However, military families have added stressors, such as the cost associated with those PCS moves, as well as high spousal unemployment, both of which can cause a household to become food insecure. Additionally, federal safety net programs such as SNAP, which is formerly known as food stamps, can be difficult for military families to enroll in due to income eligibility requirements that count their BAH towards their household's overall income. Very excitingly, though, the Military Hunger Prevention Act is being introduced to the Senate today, which would eliminate such barriers. My fear is that when we have reservists, active duty, and National Guard members concerned about how they are going to put food on the table for their families, it becomes a force readiness issue. Their service member is no longer focused on the mission at hand because they are worried about the tough choices that their families are having to make on the home front. As a community, we need to acknowledge that this is an issue, but that we also need to become aware of the resources that are available to help assist. Whether it be a Feeding America member food bank, such as the one we're broadcasting live from today, a local food pantry, or a government assistance program. As a military community, we tend to take care of our own. We rely on our fellow military families to help give support, show strength, and tackle the issues that we sometimes face on a daily basis. It is clear that food security is an issue and one that must be faced head on. The data from MFAN's survey tells these stories and paints a clear picture of the need. Because after all, one military or veteran family struggling with food insecurity is one family far too many.
Thank you so much, and thank you for making the distinction between food bank and SNAP, or what we used to know as food stamps. And one is confidential and the other is anonymous. And it's really hard to get a sense of what the issue is. And with you out there with the military families, thank you for the perspective. It's very important. Keisha Dilde, tell us about your work with military and veteran families. When military families come to you for financial counseling, what are their top concerns, and what have you learned from them in those exchanges?
So interesting to me, I prepared my remarks before, of course, the survey results, this morning they were released. So They dovetail very nicely, I think, in what I see when families come to me. And so when military families first come to me, they start a lot of their questions with should I? Should I pay more on my college debt or continue to defer and put the money towards something else? Should I buy a house now or should I wait till my next duty station? Or should I just continue to rent? Should I increase my TSP? Should I start a Roth IRA? Should I invest in the stock market? Or should I keep my savings in a CD? Should I take the Survivor Benefit Plan, SBP, or should I protect my family with commercial life insurance after I retire? The truth is that all these answers will depend on the financial circumstances and goals of each individual family. But there are some commonalities in their concerns that I've tried to divide into 3 general categories or themes. First of all, debt. Military moves, deployments, temporary duty and training requiring maintaining multiple households, the prevalence of available credit, and the temptations of online shopping. All these things can lead to consumer debt in a military family, which is not to say that all military families that I see are in debt or have debt, but many worry about the debt they do have, and some view debt as more or less a life sentence. Of particular concern recently has been paying off college debt. With limited employment opportunities at some duty stations, spouses lack even the ability to contribute to paying back what can be hefty student loans, which can create strain on family financial security. Second are benefits. A concern among military families is that they lack knowledge and understanding of how their military financial benefits work, especially as programs like the blended retirement system add complexity to their plans for their future. Training on benefits often does not include spouses, and Q&A sessions often do not allow for specific questions relating to individual circumstances. In addition, online access to accounts and information can be a laborious process, layered with multiple steps, multiple passwords, confusing facts and figures, and long phone wait times and snail mail delays when they give up on the online logins. And so the last category is really long-term savings and goals. There's a general feeling conveyed by the military families that I see that they should be doing something better or more with their money, particularly their long-term and retirement savings. The interesting thing I found is that long-term financial success is in no way tied to rank or size of household income or sophistication of investment strategy, but rather behaviors such as budgeting, finding a way to live below their means, saving for future goals, and understanding their needs versus their wants. I have among my clients an example of an E5 with a spouse and children who is set for retirement. And I have a different example of an O4 in the same family circumstance who is not. What I've learned from them. So my work with military families has reinforced that they are resilient, they are resourceful, and they are just really fun to be around. When they're committed to a project like planning for their family's financial success, they are engaged, they're decisive, and they ask really great questions, sometimes really hard questions. In general, I've learned that most military families have modest goals for their futures. They're not seeking an extravagant lifestyle in retirement, but rather they would like to travel. They would like to be close to their family and friends. They'd like to fulfill their financial obligations, and they'd like to know always that their families will be okay, no matter what happens. So, in closing, I'd like to thank the Military Family Advisory Network for the opportunity to share my thoughts today, and also for their tireless work on behalf of military families. I'd also like to thank Taylor and the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia for hosting their great venue today, as well as their advocacy for families in need. Thanks so much.
That's wonderful. And Keisha, thank you so much. Couple of things to highlight in Keisha's remarks is the social and behavioral part of financial readiness. And the one common thread through many maladaptive coping and suicidal ideations is financial issues. So, and it's folks like Keisha, when people, they appreciate the peer leadership of people like Keisha. So while we have Military One Source and all that's goodness, and now it's going to be, it looks like it's going to be extended to veterans' families thanks to Senator Kaine and some good work on the Hill. You cannot underestimate the damage to a family psyche with financial issues. And I just also want to shout out MFAN and their good work with MilSense. If you haven't seen it, a remarkable combination of social learning and financial readiness that will keep our families safe. So thank you, Keisha. Really appreciate that. And now we're going to move on to Commander Wiggins. Commander Wiggins, you know better than all of us. Actually, I'm over here. You need to look at the camera, sir. There you are. Awesome. Awesome. Although you are a dazzling figure, I must say. So we know that there's a certain there's a certain segment of our population, our community, that will only go to the clergy for help, regardless of what the issue is. And one of the new findings this year was related to how military and veteran families are turning to faith-based organizations for support. We're now actually starting to quantify it. So tell us a little bit about your role and how you do work with the community to support military families, and those times when families should seek out their chaplain.
All right. Thank you, Rosemary. As a military active duty member, I have a vested interest in this problem, and I'm so thankful for the MFAN for doing this survey. When I joined the military 20 years ago, we were all taught that when you have a problem, you can go to a chaplain. Many of our families are coming into the military. They're leaving their support groups of their churches, their communities, their moms, their dads, and they don't have anywhere else to go. They don't know how to maneuver through the military system. And so they come to the clergy because they want a voice that actually cares, a voice that will lend them a sympathetic ear, you might have you. When we deal with this food shortage problem, I see it as a threefold: the pre-problem, the problem itself, and the post-problem. The pre-problem is many of our families are young. They haven't been given the life skills of managing the money. They haven't been shopping, using coupons. They don't really know how to best manage the household and the food in the network. When we started helping families with the Holiday Assistance Program years ago when I first became a chaplain, we would give families turkeys and all the fixings for a Thanksgiving dinner. We found that many times they would sell the dinners and keep the money and then go out to eat because it was just so much work at the time. Now, we give them actual gift certificates so that they can actually go out and purchase the meals that they would like to prepare. This past year, we gave out $6,400 to help feed 190 families. At Thanksgiving time and at Christmas, we gave out $5,800 to help 180 families during Christmas. The truth is, if we'd had over $10,000 more dollars, we could have given that away to help out more families. Any amount of money we've had, we could have given. We also have recommended that many of our families seek out local community clergy, which we have relationships and collaborate with, who have food banks, who have programs of helping to assist different families. Why does this occur? It's not because our young families are incompetent in running their households. We all know that one medical crisis, one bad instance in your family, one injury can have you really hurting financially. Many of our young family members are taking care of their parents. Many of them have high mortgages. Many of them have car issues. And some of them literally are going through divorce and have child support and things that put a big pull on their finances. So they come to us. We try to provide all the help we can, but the good thing also is that besides just giving them a supporting ear, we have a resource network with Fleet and Family Services and many other financial management like Keisha and Command First to help them plan a better budget. Lastly, we get involved because the start of the problem may seem financial, it may seem the food shortage, but there's a certain amount of stigma that comes with not being able to feed your family, a certain amount of shame that can also come with that. And this can lead to a high level of depression, low self-esteem, isolation. And so we want to be there for the pre-problem to try and get them the tools they need throughout, try and get them the actual food, but we also want to be there with them when they're going through this crisis to let them know that they're not alone, that we can help them possibly thwart that depression, stay away from any domestic issues, and help keep our families together, because we know that that family resource is essential to the military. And so that's why we get involved, and we try to stay involved for the whole length of their career. If they are moving, we will often do a soft handoff to another clergy in the duty station of which they're traveling to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Taylor, Keisha, and Commander Wiggins. Now we travel west to Colorado Springs. A big thank you to the Fine Arts Center at Colorado College for hosting this panel. Our panelists include Kimberly Robertson, an MFAN advisor and director of engagement at the Society for Military Spouses in STEM, Colonel Bob McLaughlin, Chief, Operating Officer at Mount Carmel Center of Excellence of Colorado, and Kim Wynn, teacher of the Military Artistic Healing Program and a Military Spouse Program participant. Mary Robinson. Thank you all for being here today. Kim, let's start with you. Colorado Springs was recently ranked as the #2 best place for veterans to live. What makes Colorado Springs a good fit for the military and veteran community?
Thank you. That's a great question. So Colorado Springs is a vibrant community that is currently home to 40,000 troops and 80,000 veterans and their families. This is actually my hometown, and I am delighted to be able to showcase this community to everyone here who's watching. So Colorado Springs is a unique community. It's very special because it is built on the backs of people helping people. It is neighbors helping neighbors. It is schools and churches and community centers reaching out to the military community and helping each other. It is the businesses, the public-private partnerships that go together, and it is the local municipalities working hand in hand with the military installations to really affect change, and it boosts the economic development. But this could be said about a lot of communities. The survey results really demonstrate that there are many communities out there helping our military members and families. But there's something about Colorado Springs that really shines. And I have to say, I grew up here. I am the daughter of an Army brat and a Navy veteran. So this is where I started my time in, but I'm actually an active duty Air Force spouse. So I had the opportunity to kind of see this community through many different lenses, and I've also been able to travel and go to many different installations and communities and see that there are opportunities here that aren't elsewhere. It is where you go into a shop and the shop owner thanks you for your service. It is where the local media recognizes not just one day for military, but they have several days a week that they show military stories and human interest stories like what you would see here today. There are the local businesses reaching out and finding not jobs, but careers for military spouses and veterans. And it's really the hand-in-hand working together that creates a brotherhood and that camaraderie that you find inside the installation gates that is coming outside. So there is something that always drew me back here. It's that little pain in my heart that aches for Colorado Springs that I think so many other people have when they've been here. They might be stationed here for a month, it might be a year, they might have been stationed here several times throughout their career. And there's always that opportunity to come back to Colorado Springs that brings people back upon a retirement. So Colorado Springs is a unique community that I would love to showcase and see if we can duplicate those efforts in communities across the country and the world so that people can recognize that there are organizations out there like the people in this space here today that are representing that really should showcase their military and veteran community and really help reach out neighbor to neighbor, community member to community member, and help our military and veteran community grow and shine and feel welcome so that they can call Colorado Springs their home and feel that this is their place.
The Chamber of Commerce must love you.
They're sitting right here.
Oh. That was not a plant. That was not a plant. Bob, tell us a little bit about your good work at Mount Carmel as the COO and your work there. How does collaboration and the role of public-private partnerships help enhance services provided to the local military community?
Well, thanks. It's first a pleasure to be here. I've drinking the Kool-Aid as well. I'm an Army veteran, and my life was changed dramatically in 2009 when I received orders to report to Fort Carson as the garrison commander there. And in that capacity, and some of the staff that I worked with in that capacity is in the room, and they'll tell you that it's a great community. And the ability for the Fort Carson team and the other military installations here to work with the community was a very good experience for me to watch from the inside out what this community can do for military veterans and their families. So as I served in that capacity, I learned many things about soldier and family programs. I set out with my team then to do as much as we could together to help military families, to help families of the fallen, to help wounded warriors, and to help build resiliency among our population. The most important thing that I learned is you cannot do it isolated. You must involve the community in making this happen, and it kind of set the conditions for where I am today. The idea of public-private partnerships and the thought of doing the warm handover between pre-DD 214 and post-DD 214 is critical. And the team in the room here today would echo that. So we are always focusing on how do we do more together as a community and military installations. And in my case, it was originally focused on Fort Carson because that's where I was stationed and that's where I learned my lessons. We also have Peterson, Schriever, and the Air Force Academy in this community. So fast forward to about 2014, and I had the opportunity to come into this community as a retired military member and got to look at the landscape and see the very good work that's doing in the community with the many networks. My good friend Kate Hatton is in the audience. She leads a great collaborative effort with the Peak Military Care Network, which brings community partners together. I worked with her and her team and realized one of the pieces that we needed to add to the community is a place, a brick and mortar place where military members, veterans, and their families could come to get the services that they need. One of the things I've also learned is we as a community and other communities throughout the nation have to be able to make it easy for troops in transition and veterans to find the services that they need. Often I hear in my work, either locally, regionally, or nationally, there's a sea of goodwill out there. How do you get them all to work together? And frankly, it's a challenge. But if you're able to focus on the families, focus on the veterans, and do what you can with your resources to make a difference, it's important. So here's what I learned, and here's what we do at the Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center that helps in that effort. The first thing I would say is having a place is critical. When you link strategic thought to the tactical delivery of services, having a place that's located near the military families and the installations is very important. So that's the first thing that I started to do, is to make sure that there's a place that can do collaborative and integrated services. And we're just part of the answer. Part of having walk-in services in a place that military members and their families feel comfortable. We like to say that at the Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center, we're a beacon of support. But it's much more than a shell of a facility. It's being able to find the gaps and fill the gaps. And based on your survey results, it kind of validates some of the things that we're after. And I'll share that with you. The first one that's very important is the idea of transition and employment. What we're able to put together at the Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center is a career and employment center. And what's important about this center is we have collaborated with the county, the state, and community partners and separate philanthropic efforts to create this center where peers are counseling troops in transition and their families, and we're really trying to focus more on spouses to make sure that the employers who have jobs in the community are linked to those in need. And we think this is very important, the idea of peer counseling connected to the already important TAP programs out there. The next thing that we've learned is we have got to be able to fill the gap with supportive services. You may think you're career ready, but if you're not, the community must be able to help fill with the supportive services. You talked about financial, whether it's financial coaching and assistance, educational coaching, links to housing immediately or long-term housing, and of course, legal counseling. So we're able to bring together community partners to focus on supportive services to make it easy. Often what I see with our clients as a service member will come through the door looking for employment, and their spouse, man or woman, will see that there are supportive services and they will seek those. And the last thing that's equally as important, and you mentioned it as well, was the whole idea of health and wellness. What we've established at our center is a behavioral health counseling center that's low cost, no cost, with community partners that fills a gap so there's no waiting. Kate and I both co-chair an organization called the My VA Pikes Peak. This is also a very important initiative in linking our partners at the military installations, our partners at the VA, with the many private organizations in the community to fill the gaps. I will report to you that in this community we are making very large strides in filling those gaps. You mentioned about the public-private partnerships. That is critical. We want to continue to be a model, to be public-private partnerships with our counterparts in DOD and in the VA to make sure that there are no gaps, that the stress you talked about with transition is alleviated through the partnerships. And the last thing I want to touch on is the idea of the warm handover. This is absolutely critical. As we continue to move forward collectively as a nation and in different regions, we have to do better at the warm handover. We all have learned, and you know, that the most stress in the first year after separation is critical. We have got to continue to come together to be able to do that warm handover so that when family members feel stressed about finances, about behavioral health, or about employment, we as a community, and I see it every day here in Colorado Springs, are able to help them with their transition and make it easy. So to conclude, what we're able to do in this community, which I think is a best practice, is we basically leave no stone unturned. The troops in transition and their families can enter through a web-based community partnership. They can come to the Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center as a walk-in to get services that they need. And most importantly, what we're very proud of is our relationship with the military installations to bring to life the public-private partnerships. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to give you some feedback, and I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be a veteran, and I'm proud to be making a difference in the community in this role. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And 2 points I want to emphasize. The warm handover, the space between VA and DOD, what I call the unsupported space. It's so important for the health and wellness for our families, as you mentioned. And the public-private partnership, this is something that VA has stuck their toe in the water. DOD is still trying to figure it out, but I think they're getting some help from Congress, as only Congress can help very soon, to but this is the genius of common sense, right? This is the public-private partnership to help fill the gaps. So thank you very much. Next is Kim Wynn. One program we were very excited to learn about is the art therapy program offered by our hosts at the Fine Arts Center at Colorado College. Art therapy is a very popular program. I know that the spouse of the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Ricky Silva, is very excited about, very active in that area, and I know Mrs. Pence, the vice president's spouse, is always also active. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and what made you decide to start a program catered to the military and veteran community?
Thank you, Rosemary. The program we offer here at Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center at Colorado College, long name, we offer 2 classes. One for veteran and active and wounded, and that's for adult only. And then the other one is for the family, both parents and kids. It's 8 weeks long. It's 3 semesters a year, and it's free of charge. Anyone who are related to military we serve all branches, National Guards and reservists, and the classes are provided, located here at the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center, so that we can move away from the stigma of being a clinical setting or on base or on post. Is 2 hours long. It's once a week, and it's formatted around that we meet together and we check in and see if anyone have any issues, and then I demonstrate a technique. What I teach is an expressive techniques, not artistic techniques. So if you feel like painting an apple that look a purple apple instead of green apple, you feel free, you have permission to do that. So especially for family and kids, they can develop their own language. So I have a family that come together, and parents, I show them this technique of releasing their emotions. So they get to pick a color. And the little Katie, 5 years old, said, I'm angry, so I choose green. And then would splatter the colors out. So that's in class. And then next week, the mom came back and told me the story that Katie came home from school and said, Mom, I need some more green. I need to get my anger out. So they develop their own neutral language. Instead of saying, I'm angry, I need to release this color. So they learn communication, they learn problem solving, and they have fun together. So the more they use their imagination, the more they see possibilities. And the more possibilities they see, the more hope, so they can find solutions together. We came together 10 years ago to start this program because we see the needs. The Fine Arts Center came to Aspen Point, this is where I work, and asked to let's work together so that we can serve. And as a person from Vietnam, I was living in a war-torn country and experienced PTSD, and then witnessing my dad fell over. I was one of the boat people and die. So I know what we're living with PTSD. So that's why I went to school and got a degree in art therapy. So when I described that I had PTSD and worked through my own trauma, that gives the validity to this program.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your story and for your good work. Kim, thank you so much. And Mary Robison could not join us, so we're going to go back to Kim, who has a statement from Mary, who participates in this remarkable program.
Yes, thank you. I apologize that Mary was unable to make it here, but Mary is one of Ms. Wynn's students here, and she was so thrilled to be able to share her story that she wanted to make sure that you guys got to hear her voice. So I'm going to try to do her justice. So she says, I am absolutely thrilled to talk to you today about the art therapy program. Kim is not only an amazing artist, but an amazing person. I am a military spouse to an Army nurse care manager for the Wounded War Battalion. My husband cares for soldiers with many needs, including physical needs, behavioral needs, cancers and diseases, childhood traumas, PTSD, suicide attempts, and more. Yes, my husband is pretty amazing. However, he carries a huge burden. With over 100 soldiers in his caseload and no one to share with due to confidentiality constraints, it makes it relating to him as a wife very difficult. When my husband was unable to attend the art program with us, it gave us an activity to do together as a family. We learned so much about one another while enjoying each other in the process. Art therapy is about discovery. We learned individual areas of struggle. We created together. We laughed together. We celebrated one another. In Kim's class, she reads art. Kim can look in your art and discover how you were feeling. Sometimes we can't say in words how we are feeling, but through art, we can discover things about ourselves. Kim observes color choices, location, and sizes of shapes on the paper, and other astonishing techniques to expose how a person is feeling and how they are proceeding life at that moment in time. At times, art therapy has helped me understand my husband and children from new perspectives and with deeper insight to their innermost feelings. Art is the truest form of expression, and it's virtually impossible to hide what you're actually feeling because your art will expose and reveal your current state of mind. Art therapy uses the left side of the brain to reveal our true selves in a creative and non-threatening environment. I love it, and my kids look forward to it. At the end of each class, Kim asks us to present our art. Kids are treated with equal respect as adults, and I appreciate that, and I see my children and myself blossom in confidence, respect of others, and genuine self-discovery. Art therapy is also about connection. A personal story I have about connection is about when I was searching for my birth mother, and I learned I had a half-brother that died in a helicopter crash while serving in the Navy. I had a friend taking Kim's art therapy class who shared this with her classmates, simply asking if anyone had ideas about how to find the mother of this soldier who crashed. With unexpected coincidence, a fellow art classmate actually knew my half-brother and saw this crash happen. It was an incident he had carried for over 24 years. I was able to find my birth mother, and that fellow art therapy classmate was able to fully process that incident through art and through meeting me. By meeting me and seeing that something good came out of something tragic, he was able to release that event, and it was through art that he could express his healing. Just by having the art class, it creates an environment for connection, and connection is much needed in the military community.
So it's unfair to make the facilitator cry. So.
I cried, I'm not gonna lie.
And please share with Mary that it's a remarkable story. The really neat part, though, is as you're reading it, watching Kim beam about obviously one of her favorite students. Right? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we're going to hopscotch our way to another city, our last city, that's well known for their support of the veteran community, and that's Houston, Texas. In Houston, we have Rita Hicks, an MFAN advisor and senior counsel for Panalpina. Rebecca Bresnick, Assistant Chief Counsel for International Matters at NASA Johnson Space Center, and Kelly Land, Executive Director of Combined Arms. So welcome. The first question is for Rita. Awesome. Rita, you must get that applause wherever you go. That's remarkable, though I'm sure it's for everybody. Spouse employment has been a hot-button issue for some time, and for military spouses in particular, and now we are learning that many families have opted to live apart so that the spouse employment, and because spouse employment is such a big issue. Can you share a little bit about your own experience in that regard?
Absolutely. So I want to circle back just for a moment to what one of the things that Shelley said at the beginning of the hour, and that was that we had a number of different brains on these questions. And I was actually one of the brains analyzing the GeoBatch question. And so I say that just to mention to you that what I read over those thousands of responses made me understand that my story is not unique, and this is what a lot of spouses and families are dealing with. My husband retired 2 years ago after 22 years of service, and I served just under 10 years with him. I was already here in Houston, an established attorney, and fell in love with a military man who was at Fort Lewis, Washington at the time. And it was almost a non-discussion for us that I would have to stay here in Houston and that he would go where the Army sent him. And the reasons are the same reasons that you'll see borne out in the survey, and they were primarily finance and career. We are, as many, many families are now, a two-income household. We have to be. That's the only way that we work. And the only way that a lawyer stays employed is by staying where they're licensed. And so I'm licensed in Texas. I'm actually licensed in 4 states, but the Army never sent my husband to any of those 4 states. So here I am, here I stayed, and, even when we talked about whether I could potentially be doing something outside of my field, financial constraints were the reason that I didn't, because I came to him with a big shiny law degree and big shiny law school debt, and it had to be serviced, and my income had to be what serviced it. And then along came our son, and we now have 2 daughters too. I had to stay put because we had financial constraints to be concerned about. But also, and I want to give my husband a lot of credit for this, but also a lot of the spouses said this too, is that they're married to a partner who valued their career too. And they made the decision together that they were not going to prioritize one over the other, and they were just going to figure out how to make it work. So 43% is a massive number. Okay. Sorry, everyone else. The people in the room know me well and know that my family has had a really rough time with that decade apart. So I have a heart for how hard it is to have a spouse somewhere else and kids at home, and 43% of families is a lot of families to have to deal with these issues. But that's one thing, though, that makes me so proud of the information we're hearing about how communities are wrapping themselves around those families. Because that's really the only way that it works. When a spouse has to be in one place, for finances or career or kids was the other major reason, and I wasn't a parent most of the time we were doing this, but I get it now, the only way they make it work is by having a big, bold community wrap their arms around them. So thank you for everyone who's listening, who's been a part of that, and you all know that I love you, so Houston. Those were,
Wonderful.
life of a GeoBatch family.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rita, and thank you for sharing. And I know it's a hard topic to talk about and keep your composure because it's a hell of a stress on a family. And that military families make it work is not to be underestimated at all. Now, I think the Kleenex I think you're covered with the Kleenex there, Rita. That's good friend. Those are good friends, right, exactly. All right, Rebecca, you've had quite the career. Can you talk a little bit about Can you talk a little bit about how you made your career work as a military spouse, and what are some of those lessons learned from military spouses and for those looking to employ military spouses?
Well, very similar to Rita, I am a practicing attorney, and I would say before I had any successes, I had many failures. I started law school over 20-something years ago, and I was in a relationship with a military member, and I thought very naively, I can make this work. And after about 3 years of going through law school and trying to apply for internships and jobs, I realized that was the one stigma that was keeping me from getting employment and opportunities. And very luckily, I had seen an advertisement for an internship at the Pentagon with the Air Force General Counsel's office. And I thought, well, if anybody understands, they will. And I applied for the internship and got an interview, and I got the interview because of my knowledge and relationship with the military at that point in time. It was a great experience. However, after 3 years, 2 deployments, that relationship failed. And it was a hard time in my life, but the internship at the Pentagon turned into a full-time job. They offered me a job with their office upon, I did a clerkship and then graduated and then did clerkship and then went down to work at the Pentagon. And the internship, Mr. Fred Kuhn hired me, and Mr. Don Fox and Mr. Jay Johnson offered me my full-time job. And 2-3 years into working at the General Counsel's office, I met my now husband. Now, I promised myself I was not going to get involved with the military guy again, and you see where that got me, because I didn't want to move from Washington, D.C. I had bought a house, and similar to Rita, I had a lot of student loans, and I was like, okay, this is where I'm staying. After meeting him, 4 months later, I found myself standing out on a tarmac, waving goodbye to his F-18 as he left for Iraq, thinking, I really think I'm going to marry this man. He came back from the war and proposed, and of course I said yes, and and then thought, how am I going to make this work? He was living in San Diego again. I was in DC, and I told him, I said, I cannot move out there to be with you until I get a job. As I said, I had a lot of student loans and I had a lot of pride, and I didn't want to push my debt onto my husband and starting our marriage out that way. So due to my relationships that I made while working at the Pentagon, I got offered an interview with Northrop Grumman Corporation, and I was offered a job by Mr. Nat Piscatelli and Chris Hernandez, and it wasn't a legal job. I wasn't barred in California, so I had to go outside of my profession and find something else that I could do and be flexible, and I worked as an international business manager. 4 months into that, my husband called me at work and said, "You're not going to believe this." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I got the job in Houston." I'm like, "What job?" He goes, "No, job in Houston." He was picked up by the astronaut corps at NASA, and I kept on thinking, I started to cry. And he said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I'm so happy for you right now, but I am so sad for me." So I had signed a 1-year contract with Northrop Grumman. I had to stay behind, and we were just newly married, and I'm thinking, how are we going to do this? So he left for Houston, and I stayed in San Diego by myself, and Northrop Grumman was actually kind enough. By October, they said, "Please just go and be with your husband." And again, started the job search, and this time my resume was sent to a Marine Corps network here in Houston, and it got out to a lot of people, and I very thankfully got provided quite a few opportunities and decided to go back working for the government as an attorney with NASA, and I've been there for 14 years. So it is a success, but it's a success with a lot of heartache, a lot of stress, and a lot of distance between us, and I'm very thankful that we've made it work. Advice I can give to other military spouses: get involved in your local community. There's a lot of relationships there that you can make, and a lot of people and resources, and those connections can help you with employment. When you can't find employment, still get involved in the community, do volunteer work. You never know what that will turn into and what opportunities that might provide. Also, get involved in organizations that are national. Now that we have the internet, you can stay connected to organizations and to people all over the United States. So if you are in the position of where you're forced to move, you've already made those connections with these organizations and other people. For those organizations that can provide employment opportunities to military spouses, my plea is that you give them those opportunities. You know, I needed a job to pay for student loan debt. As you've heard, there are families out there that need jobs to put food on their table, and also to get money put away for mortgages, houses, or student educations for their children. So, and I also wouldn't see it as a handout. I would bet that any military spouse that you do employ will either meet or far exceed your expectations. And I ask that you be to them what Don Fox, Nat Piscatelli, Fred Kuhn, and all those people were to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And now we're going to go to Kelly Land. Kelly, the survey showed that transition from active duty to veteran status is a difficult experience for many. We used to think it was just about the service member, but we now know it's about the entire family. The loss of identity, the self-identity, the loss of community, and the loss of mission. Can you describe your experience supporting the local community where you are there, and what has your organization done to help military families through this important transition back to civilian life?
Sure, I'd love to. First thing I'd like to say is it's really an honor to sit next to you two up here. You know, I'm married to a military spouse, and this really this is a lot like the discussions we've had at home. And I spent 10 years in the Navy and wanted to make it 20, but it was really difficult on my spouse, and so we decided to get out. And it was one of the best decisions we ever made as a couple. But that all being said, I look at what we're doing here at Combined Arms is very important. We looked at the landscape, the veteran landscape here in Houston a couple of years ago. And in that look, it was essentially a survey. Not as pretty a survey as was produced here, but what we discovered was that veterans are unprepared in their transition and unaware of the services that are available to them whenever they in the place that they're going. We've all been through transition classes provided by the military, and it's leaves us lacking. Second thing that we found out is that veterans have more than one need. It's complex. It's not just one need that a veteran has whenever they come to see us. And then also the organizations in a community. We've got roughly 250 different addresses where a veteran can go to get services in Houston, and none of them were talking to each other. It was a very disjointed and fragmented landscape, very difficult to navigate for the veteran and their families. And then last, the data. Each organization they were producing their own data based on how they were serving veterans, but it wasn't aggregated. There was no way to really tell across that landscape what the real picture looked like. So based on those findings in the survey and then backed up by different communities that did similar surveys, we created Combined Arms. And simply our mission is to unite the community to accelerate the impact of veterans on Houston. And what does that mean? So our purpose is really, we exist to streamline that connection between veterans and organizations, and then provide accountability between the two to make sure that the veterans and organizations are working together to meet those needs. So how do we do it? Just like Colonel McLaughlin said out in Denver, first thing we did is we created a brick and mortar. That was number one. We wanted a place, a rally point where veterans could come together and collaborate to serve veterans. Number two, we created an integrated technology system based off Salesforce.com, an off-the-shelf commercial product that would help us streamline that connection and also address some accessibility issues at the same time. It also enabled us to aggregate data. Next, we wanted to market Houston as the best city in the nation for veterans. So we're going to steal that trophy away from Colorado Springs. And then that would help us really go out and market Houston to attract separating military members as far upstream as possible to a community where we know that we can serve them properly. And then last, we wanted to recruit the best-in-class organizations in our city to provide those services to veterans, so that veterans and their fellow organizations can have peace of mind that the organizations will say that what they're going to do. So, this all being said, we've produced some really interesting results. So I'll just kind of give you a couple of data points here that we found in our system that reflect your survey. So when we looked at the families in our system, well, first of all, we have 1,976 veterans today have created profiles within our system. Those veterans have created almost 7,000 cases. So that's what we're looking at right now. So very, very complex set of needs for all of these veterans. But of those profiles, over those 2,000 profiles, roughly 760 are families. So we define a family as basically someone where married, divorced, single with children. And when you look at the need categories, we've ranked those in the top 5 needs that our families have are: number one, employment. So these families are either unemployed or underemployed. So they want help from the community in solving those problems. The second highest need, and this has been addressed, is social connection. They want to be connected to that community. They miss that camaraderie that they felt while they were in the military. Number 3, financial support. So again, this reflects exactly what was said in the survey. And then fourth was growth and success. They want opportunities to continue to grow so they can achieve that upward mobility. And then last, mental wellness. They are looking to go back and connect to organizations that can help them be more whole. So this is very different from the overall grouping, but what it tells me is that military families are much more likely to approach the community for support. And we want to be there to support those families. If you have any questions about Combined Arms, please visit us online at www.combinedarms.us and feel free to give us a call. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing your experiences and what you've learned. It's a great reminder that there are so many great people and organizations nationwide in our communities that are working to support our military community. And based on the survey findings, we know that military families are turning towards you, so thank you. I'd now like to give the audience a chance to ask questions to Shelley or the panelists. Attendees in Colorado Springs, Houston, Norfolk, at watch parties and tuning in via the webcast should submit questions through PSAV Pulse, the very fabulous platform and wonderful people at PSAV Pulse.
I'm going to ask a few questions on behalf of people who submitted them online. So our first is for Taylor Miller. Do food bank programs actively reach out to military communities that face food insecurity, or is it difficult to reach them? And so that's a question for our Norfolk panel.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for submitting that question on behalf of somebody who was watching live on this broadcast. It is a great question. Here at the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia and the Eastern Shore, as we are a member of Feeding America, all of our food banks pretty much operate the same, and that we are going to serve whoever needs help putting food on the table for their families. We are fortunate that in Hampton Roads we have relationships with organizations such as the USO, who are operating food pantries, as well as with the chaplains and other organizations here that are on our bases. However, a lot of people are looking to go to places that the general community is going to because they don't necessarily want to be stereotyped as a military family who cannot put food on the table for their families.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next question is for Colorado Springs. So Kim Robertson, as a member of what seems to be a wonderful military inclusive community, can you share great ways that local programs are communicating and building engagement with military families?
That's a great question. So what I've noticed as, and I have to say I'm a little bit of an outsider because I now currently reside a little bit up the street in Buckley Air Force Base area. What I've observed is that the local EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, works hand in hand with local businesses, and they work as partnerships to reach out. There's also great organizations like the Peak Military Care Network that collaborate with a lot of the nonprofits, and they work hand in hand together. So they're reaching out as a collaboration. Very similar to how MFAN collaborates with other organizations, they're doing the same on a local level so that they can get all the information out to the military members and families. They're also reaching the military installations through a lot of the different organizations on the installations and communicating that outward.
Great, thank you. And if anyone in the room in DC has a question, feel free to approach the mic. Shelley, this question is for you. How do you think the ability to ask so many open-ended questions really impacts the results in comparison to other surveys put out in our community?
That's a good one. So for me as a researcher, I favor the open-ended questions because I don't want to guess. I don't want to guess what could be the answer. I want my respondents to tell me. And so using open-ended questions in this frame, we're getting a real view of what's happening inside our families' lives in their words, from their perspectives. And I couldn't ask for more. And so for this kind of use, I find that qualitative open-ended is so effective to just getting that window on this life.
Hi, I'm Matt Phillips. I'm a White House fellow, actually still in the Navy, active duty lieutenant commander, serving in the office of the vice president. I'm curious, this is an open question for anybody. What are some of the policy triggers that you think can help with military spouse employment? I believe military spouses currently have an unemployment rate that's 4 times the national average. I'm curious if any of the respondents to your survey had any just great ideas of how to make things easier to get hired.
You're welcome to join in here.
Oh, I will.
We did see a lot with the license portability, especially like Rita was mentioning, those kinds of things, making it easier somehow to carry your job with you if you can. And then childcare. We need help with childcare because in order for us to go look for those jobs and keep those jobs, we need that assistance.
Those are the 2 top ones. I'd also say take a hard look at how you can support entrepreneurship with military spouse in where they live. And we've discovered that everything from Etsy to online businesses help the military move and keep the family together. And military spouses are largely entrepreneurial just because of the life that they lead. DOD has a lot of barriers to entrepreneurship, so I'd take a hard look at those. And also look at the legislation that's coming out around military spouse employment and particularly how you reach the military families to ensure that they know about these remarkable resources that are available to them. So time and time again we hear, oh, I didn't know. So, and I know there are a couple of folks in the White House that are very, very interested in this or very active in it, but there's a lot of really good information. This survey is probably the best I've seen thus far when you talk about a deep dive into the needs and the fixes for military spouse employment. Thank you.
And this will be our last question. Shelley, we had a few people ask us if we can get data by city or installation, and then if we'll be taking a deeper dive into branches. So if you could just share a little bit about what's coming next.
Sure, that's a great way to end. So phase 2 of our research, we will be taking all of this data and putting it into a hopper, developing a database so that we can search by all of these issues. We will be able to tell you at a particular location if, spouse employment in Alaska, what they need from us. We can pull apart every demographic, match it to their locations, and figure out their needs. So we will be drilling down in an even more granular way to find the needs and finding the ways to serve our families.
Great, thank you so much. So that's all the time we have today. If your question wasn't answered, MFAN will follow up with you directly. It's worth noting that this survey took hundreds of hours. It's not done easily. It's not your typical survey to get this kind of granularity and ground truth from outside the 202 area code. So thank you, Shelley, remarkable work. And Shannon, who's about to have a baby. God bless. And thank you to everyone who responded to the survey. Your voices are being heard. Please remember this, that military families, it's not just a moral imperative we take care of our military families. It's also a significant national security issue about who's going to fight our future wars and how we treat the people who do fight our wars. So with that, also something I've never been able to say when I worked at DOD or VA, I'm happy to say, please pay close attention to the sponsors of this event in this survey. I endorse them 100%, and you should as well. So my brothers and sisters of other mothers, thank you very much. To learn more about MFAN, please visit their website at militaryfamilyadvisorynetwork.org. Thank you all.